What's up, guys? Welcome back to the review and discussion for UnOrdinary episode 334, because that's what episode it is that came out a week ago, and I was completely right. Anyway, so this episode was fairly good. I thought it was interesting, and there's a few things to be said about especially the reveal at the end that I like, which I talked about a little bit at the end of last week's reaction, but we'll touch on it a little again today too. Now, so the episode starts out with Grayson arriving at the apartment. His modest apartment. And he mentions that he got an alert that someone had entered the apartment, but he wasn't sure who, as no one else kind of like told him that they were heading over. As he enters, Kuyo almost kills him. Like, he gets a good cut on Grayson's neck and then starts to choke him with holding a knife up to Grayson. And that kind of just gets swept under the rug. And I kind of don't like that. Like I talked about it. I talked about it in the reaction. I don't like that just gets swept under the rug, especially because Kuyo backs off like it's no big deal. He even says like, "Oh, hey, that was a good dodge. Like, I'm impressed." And it's like, okay, dude, what if this kid didn't dodge? Like, I get that Kuyo's on edge. He also almost got murdered, so I get why he would act this way, but the fact that it just gets brushed off is it does bug me. It does bug me that, like, Kuyo was just in a near death situation, and then he chose to put like, this isn't a situation where Blake shot a warning shot at John. It's not that situation. It just bugs me that Kuyo does this immediately after breaking into a place, which, let's be honest, he did, after saying that he didn't want to be there to begin with. He didn't want to come to this safe house that they have, no pun intended. It rubs me the wrong way that, like, it rubs me the wrong way. I'll just leave it at that. It rubs me the wrong way. It's not too big a deal, but I do also think it shouldn't be treated just so casually. But we cut to Wellston, where Arlo is seen reading UnOrdinary. Honestly, it is just on his phone, it seems like, kind of like the first part of the story. So we do know that he's checked it out in some capacity. We know that he has scanned it with his phone. But we don't know for certain if he actually has started reading. But he thinks on his conversation with Cassandra, saying that he knows she's trying to also get into the anti-terrorism department to investigate Ember. That's why she works so hard. And that while he may not have proof, and it is kind of true, Arlo doesn't have much in terms of proof. He believes... Oh, I'm sorry. I totally left out. We're in the safe house. So Arlo is back at the safe house. But he believes that Remy might, and he then walks up to her while she's talking to a few other students and asks if they'd be able to talk after school. And when she asks, like, about work, he tells, well, after school she asks him about his work, like asking him, like, don't you have work today? And he just tells her about his current situation, basically saying, like, he's not really kind of, like, you know, he's not motivated there. And Remy's just kind of like, they have a moment where Remy's like, oh, I'm sorry. And both of them are like, yeah, no, I'm actually not. Anyway, but he does ask Remy if she has evidence leaking the Bureau and Ember, saying that he believes Cass would be able to get an internal investigation started. While I do understand Arlo's thought process, I'm going to be real. This feels very forced and kind of out of place, considering the conversation he just had with himself about how well hidden and corrupt the Bureau has become when it comes to Ember. I'm not sure if he's still in denial about, Valerie being involved or anything, or if he's just flat out not considering it. But if he honestly thinks that Cass, of all people, can get an internal investigation going, I don't think that Cass is that high up. Like, she's the first report to what essentially amounts to an intern. Like, in all reality, I feel Cass should not be able to get that going, not without big consequences. And I do want to say, I do stand by what I said, that I do think not every member of the Bureau is bad. I do think there are probably a lot of people like Cassandra who are trying to do good and would join their side. And also, I do get, if this is kind of how Uru is gonna go about getting Cassandra on everyone's side as well, I get that. It does just feel a little kind of like, really? Like, you just had this conversation with yourself, but you think this is possible? Okay. But honestly, it's okay. It's fine. And also, I think Cassandra is under Valerie, and Valerie definitely wouldn't let this slide if Cassandra brought it up to her. Well, we'll talk about that in a bit. But Valerie also seems to be doing some form of grunt work. Like, again, let's keep it 100%. The Ember agents that we've met are essentially doing what amounts to grunt work. Like, it's like, hey, go out, get information, deal drugs. That's like grunt work in like terms of like mafia or like crime syndicate stuff. Head honchos aren't doing that. People who are important aren't doing that. Walter White started doing that. Jesse did that because Walter told him to. And like, once they figured out their stuff, it doesn't matter. Anyway, to me, this seems like kind of a dumb idea, for lack of a better term. But I have said a lot of plans in the series wouldn't work out. That did. And if this is how we get Cassandra on everyone's side, totally fine. Regardless, he gives Remy her card, but she then gets a call from Grayson. While they head over, Kuyo is then seen on the couch meditating. Quick note about this, while he's meditating, we can clearly see that he's still got his ability active. He's definitely doing something with his aura, and it seems to be healing his injuries as the cuts have gotten a bit smaller. And one thing I will say, Kuyo does seem to have like fairly above average recovery stat, which I mean like is more than like none. But we do see that like, Kuyo is somehow healing himself. Now, Kuyo is starting to become a healer, a doctor. So I guess it would make sense that he has somehow figured out a way to heal himself with his ability. I'm willing to buy that. He has figured out a way to heal himself, and I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, maybe he's performing some kind of like tiny blade surgery with his ability, maybe. But who knows? Anyway, his injuries have healed up a bit. We can see that the scars are smaller than they were at the start of the episode. Remy and company then arrive and ask what happened, and Kuyo tells them that Brims showed up to his dorm. As they start talking about it, Grayson asks what they're referring to. Now, as everyone realizes he's out of the loop, though I will say Grayson was on the right track before. He did know in his original introduction, he did know and piece together that the Bureau clearly did not have the situation under control with Spectre or with Ember, but he didn't know this whole story. He hasn't pieced everything together, mainly because he hasn't gotten the chance to. But they inform him that Brims is an Ember agent, and when he asks if they've told the authorities about this, saying that they could really use that info, they tell him the truth. They tell him, Grayson, Ember is a branch of the Bureau. And, of course, Grayson's response to the news, denial. And he's just kind of like, guys, don't joke like that. That's not cool. And Kuyo shows him the footage of Byron. And we see that Grayson is kind of just reviewing everything. And he begins to shake a little bit, getting disheartened, saying that there has to be some people in the Bureau who would be on their side and agree with how awful this is. Basically saying, like, Grayson has a moment of, like, he basically has a moment that kind of, like, refortifies what he thought. Like, this is fucked up. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this is insane. But he also begins to shake a little bit, basically saying, like, are they untouchable? Like, there has to be some people who agree with us, right? That's when Remy mentions Cass, and when she brings him up, Kuyo also asks, like, wait, really? Remy hands him her card, and he vouches for Cassandra, basically saying, like, I trust her. She was mine and Ray's mentor. Ison quickly objects, though, to the saying, like, we don't know her. We can't trust her. What if she betrays us? But Blake says that they have to do something since they're still being targeted. And either way, they're still wanted. They're still wanted criminals. At this point, they are still in line to be arrested. Cassandra could potentially still give them a path forward. Remy makes the group decision to say, like, we're going to try it. We're just sending her information. We got nothing to lose. Let's do it. And that's when Kuyo asks if you all got anything else that we can use. We need it. Like, it's go time. Remy asks Ison if he still has the footage from the original encounter with Vulcan, to which he says he does. And Remy just says, like, all right, game time, guys. One thing I do want to point out to Ison. Once again, to Ison's credit, a homie being a homie. Even after everything that's happened, the arguments he's had with Remy, basically telling her, like, you're insane. We shouldn't be doing this. Even after he was traumatized from Vulcan, even after he was traumatized from Fury, he held on to the footage. And that's a homie being a homie. Now, one thing I do want to touch on, if they are trying to get Arlo some evidence that they can use to basically show Cassandra, the Bureau is controlling Ember. That also means that not only will Cassandra find out about Valerie, Arlo will most likely be seeing this footage. And Arlo will most likely hear Valerie's voice in that recording. And it seems like we are getting really close to Arlo and Cassandra finding out the truth about who Valerie really is. And that's going to be a very interesting conversation, if that a conversation ever occurs between the three of them. Now, all in all, it was pretty good. One thing I do want to talk about, because it seems to be a hot topic in the community right now, is Grayson. During the final conversation, the final stretch of the episode, he is standing back and kind of just taking a back seat to everyone talking about how to move next. And as he's standing back, he realizes that they are all serious about taking on the Bureau, to which Grayson was very much like, aren't they invincible now? Like, what can we do? Like, what can even be done? He even asked them, like, are you guys serious? Now, there is definitely the potential for either him to betray the team or him to back out. But in all honesty, I don't think he would do either. Now, one thing I think a lot of people aren't giving Grayson enough credit for, and they kind of just brush his attitude and his reaction to the news of him, like, kind of freaking out. They just kind of brush it off to, like, oh, he's gonna flake. Oh, like, Grayson's not built for this. And that's exactly right, but I don't think they understand that. We need to realize this is a much more terrifying situation for Grayson compared to Remy and company. Because of how far the gap is between all of them. Ison barely survived an encounter with Fury, and he was lucky that only his arm was damaged badly. It still had lingering effects on him afterwards without proper healing. He was still in bed. He still couldn't do anything. Grayson is barely stronger than Elaine. He is a 3.7. He's just past the threshold of being an elite tier. And he's also almost a senior at Agwin High. He's a third-year student. While it's definitely not impossible for him to get stronger, I think it's also a bit unlikely that he will reach high tier. I think it's unlikely that Grayson will reach a large jump in his ability to get him up to speed with everyone. Do I think, hey, he could probably catch up to Ison? Maybe. He probably could. Uru has said, ability level increases tend to happen most in high school. Grayson is getting himself into a very risky and dangerous situation. But also keep in mind, Grayson is a lot weaker than everyone. And he's seen high tiers who have barely lifted tail to tail with Ember, high tiers who have probably brought them up to speed a little bit on what their experiences have been like. And they are much stronger than him. And he couldn't handle a few low-level goons. He almost died that night if Remy and Kuyo didn't step in. And now he's been faced with the situation of, hey, it's not just elite tier level goons. It's the Bureau. It's the government we're going on after. I think it makes total sense for him to freak out about a situation that gets people far beyond his level killed. Ray, the other superheroes, Remy, Black, and Ison have been almost experienced death a lot of times at this point. And they've come close. It marks them as domestic threats, and they're being hunted down now for this. His response to be nervous in the true face of the world is perfectly reasonable. And because at the end of the day, another thing that we have to realize about Grayson's character that's most likely the case, Grayson's family, as far as we know, hasn't been murdered by the Bureau. Grayson hasn't almost been killed by them. He hasn't seen what true terror looks like. He hasn't had to come face to face with that. Compared to Remy, Blake, and Ison, and Kuyo, Grayson's just a kid in high school. Grayson, as far as we know, is just Elaine trying to be a normal high school student, being a normal high school student who only thought the government was mismanaged and unable to handle the actual threats to the society and wanted to try and make a difference. That's also why I don't think that Grayson would betray the team at this point. He might be a little annoying, but just like the rest of them, Grayson's a kid who saw how bad things were getting around him, a kid with knowing he wasn't the strongest, but still decided, I want to try and make a change. I want to try and do something good. A kid who's barely an elite tier and said, I'm going to go out and fight crime. I'm going to go try to make the world a better place if the Bureau can't handle it. And Grayson did that without having to grow up fast. Grayson wasn't, like I said, Grayson wasn't driven by the death of a loved one. Grayson wasn't fueled by anger and rage to surpass someone else. Grayson wasn't dragged into this by his friends and ultimately decided, my friends need my help, so I have to do this. Grayson saw the world start to fall apart. And Grayson said, I can make a difference, and I will. And, yeah, I honestly don't think that Grayson will betray the team. He might falter a bit. He most likely will. He most likely will freak out. But I think Remy, or Blake, or Kuyo, honestly, any of them would probably be a good fit for them. He clearly likes Remy, and Remy is the one who originally recruited him. Ison's kind of in the same situation as Grayson with being the second weakest and saying like, hey, it's scary, but it's okay. We have each other's back. Blythe can probably show Grayson, hey, this is what it means to be a king. And Kuyo could say, I'm sorry I almost killed you. Let's talk about this. I know you're scared. So, yeah. I think Grayson might falter a little bit, but I don't think he's going to ultimately betray the team or back out on them. He might say for a second, this is too much for me, guys. But they could also reassure him. And he could say, cool, let me get that better equipment I promised us. So, overall, this episode is still good. Like I said, though, I do have a few issues with it. But overall, I think the episode is still fairly well. And, yeah. We will give this episode a level 7. Fairly decent level. Or fairly decent episode. And that will be it for today. So, as always, everyone, let me know what you think down below in the comments. And as always, see you, Space Cowboy.